Welcome to another episode of Sylvie and Didy React. I'm Sylvie and I'm still writing solo, but Didy should be back next week. This video, I'm reacting to a video brought to me by one of the viewers, a commenter. His name is Voke, Vokque, who told me about the original Answer Man, another YouTuber, talking about evolution and discussing an illustration of a mousetrap and this idea of irreducible complexity. Before I get into more details, though, I would like to remind you to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And obviously, if you give me ideas, I'm probably going to respond to them. Well, we're diving into this topic of irreducible complexity and evolution and this counter argument that is called ID or intelligent design. Before I get into the two videos that I'm going to show, one is the original advocate, Michael Behe, explaining his idea of irreducible complexity, and then the Answer Man's video refuting or questioning the analogy that Behe also brings up about a mousetrap illustrating irreducible complexity. I want to start off with three preliminary points. The first is that I don't have a problem with evolution. I have a problem with what's called philosophical naturalism. It's this reductionistic idea that matter is all that there is, and this blind, unguided process of evolution is the end all be all. I don't think that that's justified. I think that another analogy that kind of hammers home the point is the analogy of the drunk who's looking for his keys under the light of a lamp because he reasons that because that's the only way that he can see the keys, that's where the keys must be. If you can only use instruments that track physical causation, that doesn't then mean that physical causation is all there is. It means that that's all you can know with those tools. So I don't have a problem with evolution. I have a problem with philosophical naturalism and reductionism. The second point is that I don't necessarily agree with Behe all the way or the irreducible complexity argument that it proves everything that Behe thinks that it proves. I'll get into a little bit more details about that after we see the first video, but this isn't a tacit agreement with everything that he says. And then just the third point, I want to be fair to the original Answer Man, who in another video, the making of the illusion of the irreducible complexity analogy, makes actually a better argument that this is a bad analogy. You're talking about mousetraps, and that is a parallel to, for example, bacterium flagellum or other organic matter in the universe. I think that's a legitimate argument. The purpose of a good analogy is to have good parallels and as many true parallels to the thing that you're analogizing. However, Answer Man still made this video, and I'm going to respond to the video. So without further ado, we're going to watch Behe in his own argument, in his own words, make his point.
The bacterial flagellum was one of the central examples of irreducible complexity Behe highlighted in his book.
If you take away the propeller, if you take away the motor, if you take away the clamps that hold it onto the cell's membrane, take away any of a number of different parts, it's not that the flagellum is going to spin half as fast as it used to, or it's broken. It doesn't work at all. It's like taking the propeller off of an outboard motor on your boat and wondering how far now you can go in the water. You can't go anywhere. So that's a problem for Darwin's theory, because Darwin's theory says that things evolve by working a little bit, maybe not very well, but a little bit, and then a mutation, a change comes along that helps it work a little bit better, and that helps the organism survive and have more offspring, and so then another change comes along, and another, and it gradually builds up to the final structure. Well, that might work for some things, but it doesn't work for systems that are irreducibly complex, things like the bacterial flagellum. Because, well, if you wanted to build an outboard motor for a boat, what would you start with? Would you start with, say, just an iron rod that, in the future would attach a motor to the propeller? Well, what's that going to do? It's not going to do anything. Would you start with just the propeller? Well, that's not going to do anything. It's not attached to anything. Would you start with just the motor? Well, that's not going to propel you anywhere. So with irreducibly complex systems like the flagellum, Darwin's idea is dead in the water, like a boat with an outboard motor that doesn't work.
Natural selection selects or favors in variations that confer a functional advantage on a system. Many of the simpler versions that you could imagine of the bacterial flagellar motor perform no function at all. So if you imagine trying to build a flagellar motor, adding parts one by one until you finally get to the complete system, you're going to encounter configurations of parts that confer no function, in which the motor simply will not work, at which point the evolutionary process will terminate. It will cease to continue because the system conferring no function will not be preserved and passed on to the next generation.
Okay. I'll start out with the thing that I agree with, and this is mentioned in a debate that Behe had with somebody who actually agreed a lot with what Behe had to say about the idea of things being designed and that there's complexity in this universe. I will say, I think this argument does defeat a simple reductionism of evolution and life to blind, unguided processes. And there is kind of that pop culture element within Darwinianism that I think the idea of irreducible complexity makes us consider that life is more complex than the simple answers we get. So I agree with that. The thing that was actually brought up in the debate that Behe had is that it does not therefore prove that all parts were formed together. Behe's debate opponent and his interlocutor mentions that all the components in the bacterium could have independently formed before forming together, but that requires a complex system in order to do it. So it's not that the argument is completely wrong, but that I think it doesn't prove precisely what Behe thinks it proves. So this argument is made, take it or leave it, and Answer Man gives his own video response, which we're going to watch right now.
You can't take a part away and still have it work. If you took away this hammer, the mice don't get caught. Take away the spring or the holding bar, any of the pieces, it doesn't work.
What Michael Behe doesn't seem to understand is that natural selection often takes pre-existing structures, adds to them, and also removes redundancies over time, and this can lead to the illusion of irreducible complexity. So let's make a mousetrap one step at a time, starting from a very simple structure, which is a box with a separate lid. Maybe you were using this box to store paper clips, but you have a mouse problem and you're sick of chasing the mice all over the room with very little success of catching them. You want something to make that process easier, so you take this box, place it on the floor, and add a bit of bait. This way, a mouse can sometimes run into it, and when it does, it becomes easier to catch. But because you have to run up to it without the mouse seeing you, the mouse usually runs away by the time you get the lid on the box. It occurs to you that if you attach the door with a simple hinge that you make out of a coiled up piece of wire, you can run up and slam the door shut much quicker. This makes it a bit more efficient, but the door rubs on the ground, so it's not optimal. You realize if you add a bar, you can turn the mousetrap on its side and let gravity control the door once the bar is kicked out from under it. Next, you attach a string to the bar. This way you can hide on the other side of the room and pull the string when the mouse scurries in there, and this makes it even more successful at catching mice. Then you discover you can modify the hinge into a spring just by twisting it a bit more. You can now prop open the lid with a bar, and now pulling the string causes the top to close much more forcefully and the mice can't escape. Right now you can only catch small mice with this trap, but you realize that if you remove the sides, you can catch much bigger mice with it. But now the spring gets in the way, and the door can't close completely, so some of the smaller mice can get away. You decide to modify the door by cutting a bit off the bottom. This allows the door to close all the way. It's a lot more efficient, but it's a little too light now and it doesn't kill some of the bigger mice. Reinforcing the door with a hammer makes it much stronger. It's a bit bulky and the door is actually redundant now, so you remove it. This is a lighter and stronger version, but it's now a bit unbalanced. Moving the hammer to the middle gives it better stability. And then your final revelation is that by adding a simple catch to the base, you can then pull the hammer all the way back and increase its torque. You remove the string and now you have a modern mousetrap. See, it looks like it was irreducibly complex, but you can see that building it in steps by adding one piece at a time, making modifications to pre-existing parts, and then removing redundancies was all we needed to do.
Now the problem for Darwin's theory is that, number one,
Okay, so let's address this too. First off, I want to say that I think Answer Man captures an evolution of technology among human organisms very well, but that inherently is tied to design and intelligence because you have a human being in this analogy with the mousetrap who is constantly building upon this mousetrap and perfecting it for the purpose of catching mice more effectively. This ties into the point that I made before, which is his other video where he's describing the making of this video, that the mousetrap is a bad analogy. And I think that's actually a good point. Like I said before, analogies are only as effective as the true parallels they draw. And so to say that this is a bad analogy between organic matter and something that is obviously man-made, that the parallels of irreducible complexity may not sync up correctly, that's a fair argument. But Answer Man doesn't do that in this video. I think that a better analogy for what we see is programming. Dennis Noble, who's a peer of Richard Dawkins, not a Christian or a proponent of ID or the intelligent design movement, critiques the Darwinian reductionistic view that Dawkins has and this idea that the genes are the end-all be-all. This man, Noble, who is also a program designer as well as a physicist, or not a physicist, a physiologist, makes the point that there are complex systems and programs that help guide the progression of organisms that include even the genes. So the genes aren't the ultimate determining factor that are like the switch to turn on and off traits. They are themselves part of a bigger system. So in fact, as scientists studied the genome, they used methodologies developed by the code breakers of World War II who decoded the Enigma machine. So in other words, scientists looking at this one component of evolution expected designed intelligence, and when they used methodologies that were built on decoding intelligently coded messages from the enemy, they uncovered knowledge. So they treated it like a program, and they found true actionable knowledge that has advanced science. I think that is a good point to show that there's much more to the picture than just unguided processes. Whether there's a progression or not, I think it's hard to get away from this idea of design, which is the ultimate argument that Answer Man is trying to refute. And I think B, he makes it, but I don't know how well he makes it. The point is, I think that you can't escape this idea of design and intelligence because A, you find that the mechanisms, so in the genes themselves, in the genome, there is this complexity that we decode using methodologies that we've used with other intelligently designed complex systems, namely the Enigma machine in World War II. We used that methodology there, and then we used it again with the genome, and we've had beneficial results of decoding. I think the second thing is to realize that In the analogy itself, so Answer Man makes the point elsewhere better, but here I don't think he makes it well because he's engaging with the analogy and therefore unquestioningly assumes this human perspective, which is an intelligent designer who's working on a piece of technology that he's slowly advancing in incremental steps. Incremental steps, like I said before, I don't have a problem with evolution. I don't have a problem with it, incremental steps, but that's not going to then disprove that there's not somehow intelligence or design behind it just because you have incremental steps. So I want to conclude just by reiterating that I think Behe does not prove that irreducible complexity is the silver bullet that makes Darwinian evolution completely irrelevant. But I do think that he affects kind of that top Darwinian view that everything is reducible to unguided processes through the genes. And I think that the analogy, whether it's good or not, if you engage in it, you're still engaging in something that is fundamentally based on intelligent design. Well, that concludes this video. If you would like to see more videos like this, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and email me if you have your own ideas. And once again, thanks to Voke for bringing up this YouTuber for me to respond to. I'll see you in the next episode.